The Cold War was a war that never became hot. Throughout this 4.5-decade-long staring contest between the world's strongest superpowers, the world braced itself for nuclear Armageddon. The United States went on a spread to contain communism, while the Soviet Union wanted to spread it. The two superpowers, however, did not declare war on each other. Instead, they decided to support multiple proxy wars, which are smaller wars supported by bigger powers. The tension between the two superpowers got its peak in the city of Berlin, home of the Berlin Wall. After World War II, the continent of Europe was divided into two parts, East and West. Western Europe was a free, democratic, collective group of nations, while the East was made up of totalitarian states controlled by the Soviet Union. As Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, once said, "There's an iron curtain in between Europe." This caused a lot of tension between the European countries. France, Britain, and West Germany were against the Soviet Union, forcing communism in several countries. This split of countries kept them from being able to see or interact with one another. This division of friends, families, kept businessmen and political figures from conducting any form of communication between the nations. The Truman Doctrine is widely known as the thing that sparked the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States. On March 12, 1947, U.S. President Harry Truman spoke to Congress about the United States providing political, economic, and military assistance to all democratic nations. This speech became known as the Truman Doctrine. Under this doctrine, the United States provided aid to Greece and Turkey in their communist versus democratic civil wars. In total, the U.S. provided $400 million equipment and military personnel to Greece and Turkey. The Greek and Turkish civil wars became the first proxy wars of the Cold War era. The Soviet Union wanted the city of Berlin all to themselves. At the time, the city of Berlin, located in Soviet Germany, was also divided between the two government types, communist and democracy. In June of 1948, the Soviet Union, who wanted to control all of Berlin, set up a blockade between West Germany and West Berlin. The reason why the Soviets set up the blockade was that it would drive the US, France, and Britain out of Berlin. With a blockade, it was difficult for the Western nations to provide food and resources to West Berliners. The Soviets said that they were repairing the roads that connected Berlin to the German borders. After the blockade, the Western nations started a 300,000 plane airlift, which is known as the Berlin Airlift. The U.S. decided on an airlift on Berlin because if they used force to get rid of current blockade, the Cold War would possibly become an actual war. The airlift lasted 1 year, and the Soviets wasted lots of materials for nothing. Known as the European Recovery Plan, this United States plan, enacted in 1948, provided an estimated $12 billion in multiple Western European countries. This plan was named after U.S. Secretary of State George C. Marshall. With the money, Western European nations rebuilt and repaired buildings, restored cities, and helped citizens with building new homes and hospitals. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was formed in 1949 by the United States, Canada, and multiple other Western European countries because of the growing fear over the Soviet Union. The United States got increasingly more involved in the European affairs, and tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union grew dramatically. Specifically, the United States, Canada, Belgium, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, and the United Kingdom were the members that originally came together, later being joined by Greece and Turkey in 1952 and West Germany in 1955. NATO's main purpose was a defensive pact against the Soviet Union, or more specifically, an agreement that if one member of NATO gets invaded by the Soviets, all members would band together to defend from the Soviet offensive. European countries feared an upcoming Soviet invasion, especially after their show of brutality during World War II. This fear urged countries to join the agreement, for if they were attacked, they would have several countries there to defend them. The Warsaw Pact was a political and military alliance formed by the Soviet Union in 1955. The purpose of the pact was to counterbalance the West NATO's. After West Germany joined NATO in 1955, the Soviet panicked because a NATO member was bordering their block of land of influence. Members of the pact included all East European states except East Germany. In reality, the pact just drew East European states closer to Moscow as the Soviets made all the decisions of the pact. The Berlin Wall developed as people slept. It was originally built by East Berlin due to the people fleeing to West Berlin. The Soviets denied its purpose to keep the people in, stating that the wall was to defend against a possible invasion attempt. The Berlin Wall was built in phases. It started as a basic barbed wire line with military patrol. Over time, the Soviets eventually installed a metal fence. The people watched as the metal fence gained a barbed wire layer at top. Beyond the fence was the site of construction of a rough concrete wall. After the concrete was finalized, barbed wire was placed atop once again. The wall had a section known vaguely as a death strip. It had soft sand on the floor to clearly highlight footsteps, dozens of floodlights for clear visible of attempting escapees. Then there were the true dangers, including tripwire machine gun traps, patrolling guards, and even dogs trained to kill anything that was trying to leave. All these defenses caused the wall to gain a reputation as impossible to cross. Although the people of East Berlin were now trapped, the situation of Berlin was now seemingly diffused. John F. Kennedy has even gone as far to declare, "A wall is hell a lot better than a war." Now, although the reputation of the wall seemed to stand true, impossible would not be the word to describe it. It is estimated that at least 171 people were killed attempting to cross the wall. However, an estimated 5,000 East Germans managed to cross the border using various methods, some being more creative than others. The most common practice of travel was ascending the wall through adjacent windows, climbing over the barbed wire, and sneaking through the shadows. Some people took hot air balloons, others traversed the sewers. And there had even been cases of people crashing cars full speed into the wall, weakening portions. The defense of the East German side were a lot greater than the West, allowing the west side of the wall to be covered in graffiti. In mid-October, the Soviet Union started denying access to U.S. diplomats from accessing East Berlin. On October 22nd, U.S. diplomat E. Leitner Jr. was denied access into East Berlin. As a result, the U.S. sent General Clay, the same person that ordered the Berlin airlift to Berlin. Clay ordered that American M48 tanks go to Checkpoint Charlie. The Soviets then brought their T-55 tanks and performed a standoff known as the Standoff at Checkpoint Charlie. John F. Kennedy called Nikita Khrushchev and said that if you back your tanks up an inch, we will too. The world watched as the two biggest superpowers backed up an inch, taking 16 hours to do so. On June 12, 1987, President Ronald Reagan gave a speech where he declared that he wanted to tear the wall down, but he could not actually tear the wall down without generating international conflict. He continued to provide West Berlin with supplies and other resources. On November 8, 1991, the Communist East Berlin announced that they were changing their relations with the Democratic West, and it was surprisingly quick. Crowds began to form on the border of the wall on both sides, and the guards could not handle the mass amount of people. They quickly overpowered the guards and were able to take the wall. They then proceeded to climb the wall and began to start smashing it down piece by piece, and they quickly had the plan to merge the two sides together by combining highways, roads, sidewalks, and neighborhoods back together. There is still a singular piece of the wall up as a memorial for the split families and friends that were restricted from seeing each other.